Now, I don't know whether any of you have seen the clip on YouTube of City of Cars. Anybody seen that? There's a great clip on YouTube if you go in and type City of Cars. This is a guy who's just made a home movie, and it talks about Auckland's absolute obsession and love with the car. It makes some brilliant points. It talks about, as I chatted to Jeffrey earlier, about the fact that Auckland is still operating Perth trains, rolling stock that they decided to get rid of in 1993. Some great facts like that, so if you put that in YouTube and have a look at that, I would suggest you have a look at that. But it does just talk about our obsession with the car. And these are the type of environments that we're creating. And that regardless of how these buildings actually perform, they might be great energy efficient buildings, this isn't a sustainable place as far as I can see. And we're building a lot of this still, our residential areas, and it looks like that photo's been elongated and everything looks a bit too low, but that's actually how it should be. And I pinched these couple of slides from a guy called Dan Burdener, who's a real proponent of walking, who was over last year visiting from the States. Some of you may have gone to his talk, and I think this is just sums it up brilliantly. This is near where the Cheers bar. Does anybody see the Cheers program back in the 90s? Centre of Boston, and you're 1,550 feet, around about 500 meters or 5 minutes walk from all those different things. And yet he keeps going on about in the States that so many of the urban environments built in the States are like this, and you are 1,550 feet from absolutely nothing. You know, you cannot do anything else but drive to places in that sort of environment. And we're faced with the same thing here. And if you look at, this is Parnell. Parnell is a great place. I think one of the places that is working particularly well. And when I say that, people go, yeah, that's because it's really expensive. And I think, well, no, it's working well, which has probably made it desirable, which has made it expensive. But there's a whole range of different places to live, old places to new places, big houses still to apartments. And everything's mixed together, everything's thrown together. You've got houses next to doctors, next to architects' practice offices, educational institution uses. It's all just sort of thrown in together, a mixture of uses. And yet so much of our planning system now is about keeping everything separate. We almost can't get Parnell now if we tried. And again, we've got the same problem. This is what we're sort of building now on the edge of many of our towns and cities. And again, 500 meters from absolutely nothing. And we wonder why we're having to drive everywhere. We've got congestion, we've got obesity problems, and air quality problems. And I think this is a great slide again, pinched from Dan Burden, that you know, so often that we do shop for a house, we consider the building only. How good is the building? Whereas what's really important is, where is the building? I think density is an issue that I hear talked about so much here, but often in the wrong context. We talk about places like this. This is the lakes down in Tauranga, and there's parts of this development that have been zoned for higher density, and yet it's still in the middle of nowhere. I think we're missing the point when we talk about just having higher density. You'll only get people to live in higher density. It's a trade-off. You start actually to give away things in terms of private space, either within or around the home. Maybe less car parking, but you get it back. Go back to the Dan Burton slide. You get it back by all the facilities that you've got in place. That's why you sort of choose to live in high density, because it maybe allows you to live without a car, or to walk to different places, or you can walk to work. But if we're just increasing density everywhere, including some of the remote places, then we're failing to understand the challenge. Sorry. So going back to my list, barriers that we're facing in New Zealand to getting better urban planning, urban design. And the final point that I'm going to talk about is generally our lack of precedents and good examples. We've got so much of this, and I think this puts a lot of people off when we talk about intensifying our places. This is what people immediately think of, and you can understand why this puts so many people off, and so many communities are opposed to intensification of their suburb. You think, well, I'm not having any of that. So much of this, and this, again, apologies to anybody involved in this. So much of this, as I say, you know, this could be anywhere around the country. You might be able to recognise where these are. And I was fortunate enough in working in the UK. One of the benefits of obviously of the UK is that Europe is just on its doorstep. And we ran a project in a neighbourhood called Scotswood, where it was extremely run down. Most of the population had left. It was regarded generally as the biggest brownfield site in the UK. Very small population left. Nobody wanted to live there. But we had to work with the existing population, and we had to come up with plans to regenerate that area of Scotswood. And what we did, we worked with this community, and we put to them examples of what was generally considered as the best practice new places around Europe. And you can put pictures in front of them, and they were like, nope, don't like that, no, hate that, don't want it. And what we were fortunate we were able to do, because we'd got so much regeneration funding there, we actually decided to form a working party of about 10 or 12 of the local residents, and we were able to take them round to some of the best projects within the UK and across Europe. And it was amazing, the reaction. Some of these people had never left Newcastle, some of them haven't got passports, they just lived in the same place all of their lives, maybe in the 50s and 60s, some of these people. And we took them to these places, and once you experience these places, they were absolutely blown away. They were coming back, I want that, I want that, I want that tomorrow. And one of the places, I'm sure you've heard in lots of presentations, Hammarby, just on the edge of Stockholm, originally Olympic Village site, but they failed to get the Olympics, but they decided to push on through. And they created this great suburb. And, you know, it is extremely attractive. And as I say, lots of our residents from Newcastle, very ingrained sort of Geordies from Newcastle, just absolutely love this sort of thing. You can see the quality of the place coming through. And they felt they could live there, even though it was apartments. You're never going to get people living in apartments, but when you've got this sort of quality environment, all centred around brilliant public transport into the centre of Stockholm, people were starting to buy into this. Obviously, we struggle to be able to do that here. Everything's so far away, we can't really sort of ship our residents around to, even to cross to Australia. I realise that, but that's where we were quite fortunate in the UK. This is a picture of the residents going around. Another one of the places we went to was Kreuzberg in Germany, one of the housing expos. So a site built up very specifically as a demonstration of what you can do with housing. Doesn't look very good there, but that's during construction. But again, took the residents around, gave them a tour, met local residents there. Brilliant public transport again. It's about 20 minutes from the centre of Hanover. Road links not so great, but so everybody has to use the tram to get into the centre of Hanover. And a great quality environment, as I say. Another one. Another example, which I think is extremely relevant for our waterfront site down at Wynyard Quarter, is Västra Hamnen site at Malmö. It's just over there, so disused sort of port area. Again, we took the residents, had a look at all the eco measures that there, and we found that the architects actually trying to compete and outdo each other in terms of eco measures and environmentally friendly measures. Didn't really have to push them at all, they were trying to compete with each other. A great site near their harbour bridge as well, linking Denmark with Sweden. And they produced this sort of great quality place next to the waterfront. And on a great summer's day, which you don't get too many in Malmö, but on a nice summer's day, you can get sort of tens of thousands of people using this open space. And the controversial turning torso tower in the centre of it. Some people love it, some people hate it. But it was just all sort of designed as a whole place. I think that's my point. Actually, somebody took the trouble to think about how a place works rather than just letting a whole series of building designers loose on each of the buildings. But of course, we've got a growing number of examples in New Zealand. It's not all doom and gloom. And we need to sort of build on these examples and publicise them. And we need to explain to people what's going for these examples. They are small often. We haven't got sites on the scale that the European examples have touched on, but we have got some great places emerging. And I think that's really encouraging. So those two previous ones, Queenstown, Matakana, just north of Auckland, Chews Lane development, that's just won Urban Design Awards down in Wellington. I think Tauranga Waterfront, it's got a lot of things going for it. So I think we've got some great examples ourselves.